I've decided this will be one of my last videos of the year. While I have appreciated the views, I have been disappointed by the very few subscribers I seem to get when I upload. I don't think it's fair that it seems as though out of all the channels I know that talk about horror movies, I seem to be the only one who's not allowed to turn a profit from their hard work. And I don't just make edited videos in a day. Sometimes I'll rewatch a whole movie. Every time I write a whole script, I'll record the audio and cut out any stutters or errors. And I'm not saying I'm ungrateful for the amount of support I've received so far, but I just want the same opportunity to profit off of my work that other content creators on this website seem to have. This is not an attack on those who have supported me, but a call for a more concentrated effort toward increasing my subscriber counts. Scream 4 is my favorite horror movie of the 21st century. Granted, that isn't high praise considering its competition, but nevertheless, it's the one horror movie to come out in the last 22 years that I find myself revisiting every few months or so. I was 13 when it was released in 2011. And given that I was only 2 years old when Scream 3 came out, I wasn't really aware of it, nor could I quite appreciate it as a continuation of a film trilogy that many felt had ended on a low note. It should be noted that I'm not someone who shares this belief, and I very much enjoy Scream 3, but when I look at the ways that Scream 4 stands out, much of this comes down to potential and interesting story and amazing performances. There was potential in where the story could go in a new trilogy that unfortunately went unrealized. There was an interesting story to skip 10 years into the future of the returning trio and see how our seasoned protagonists would combat a younger Ghostface. And the film is saddled with amazing performances, but I think the one that stands out the most to me is Emma Roberts as Jill Roberts. I'd go as far as to say that, in my opinion, Jill is the best Ghostface in the series and best character out of any of the ones introduced after the first film. Jill is introduced as Sydney's cousin who seemingly finds herself at the center of a new spree of murders. Looking back at Scream 4 through the prism of Jurassic World and Ghostbusters Afterlife, which follow a formula of taking older characters and having them play some secondary role to the new protagonist, it isn't hard to figure that Jill will be the star of this new trilogy. She's the younger cousin of the franchise's main protagonist, so she inherently has a connection with the trio. And Emma Roberts was actually a few years younger when Scream 4 was filmed than Neve Campbell was when Scream was filmed, meaning that she could theoretically play Jill for multiple sequels. Of course, none of this happened, but that's not what I'm trying to convey here. What I am seeking to establish is that Jill's character starts off very similar to Sydney's, and I think that was a purposeful move by Wes Craven. During the third act of the film, it is revealed that Jill and Charlie are the two ghost faces, with Jill's last act before her reveal being her stabbing of Sydney. After her killing of Trevor and Charlie, she explains to Sydney that she intends to frame the two as the murderers and cast herself as the sole survivor of their slaughter in the hope of becoming famous from her supposed ordeal. This reveal was the most shocking one for both me and my brother, Stallion, when we were watching the Scream films together. The reason for this, in my opinion, is because I saw it at a time when there were only 4 films, and there was very little known about what would be in the 5th film, so I thought anything was possible. The other reason is, as I said before, Jill seemed to be set up as a new protagonist. I've seen false leads before, but I can't think of any others who turned out to be the antagonist. Her motive of wanting to become famous through constructing or staging an event that casts her in a sympathetic light is one that really resonates now. We've seen people in real life who have enriched themselves through tragedies that have happened to them. And while I'm not saying they purposefully created the traumatic events the public saw them affected by, I am saying her motive becomes more realistic when knowing that this happens in the real world. Jill says, well, sick is the new sane. And shortly thereafter says, you don't have to achieve anything. Those lines are so resonant with me because I've seen people become famous over the dumbest things. You go on social media for 5 seconds and see all the women with thousands of followers, And they don't get these large draws of support because they're writing or saying something profound, or they can draw or sing or express talent in any conceivable way. People have a strong proclivity, especially on social media, to pay more attention to ridiculous garbage than almost anything that requires talent or effort. If I had a video of Emma Roberts making out with me, which would never happen because I have not been blessed with good looks, and I uploaded it, that would get more views than if I did a documentary on the life of Wes Craven. Jill sarcastically asks Sydney what she's supposed to do and questions if she should go to college, grad school, or get a job. And this goes back to what I just said. She is a representation of the worst qualities of the current generation. But what makes her character interesting is that she is self-aware and makes many good points about a backward system. I've seen people in real life mention the depravity of having educated individuals who spend years honing their talents and doing what was necessary to get certificates that authenticate their skills, only for them to make less money and thereby be seen as having lesser value than someone who can sing, rap, or play a sport well. Jill is a very strong contender for the most evil Ghostface. If you look at Billy and Mrs. Loomis, they have enough humanity to love each other, with Billy only targeting Sydney's mom because of her ruining of his parents' relationship, and Mrs. Loomis explicitly wanting to kill Sydney because of the murder of her son. I think Jill having no qualms with murdering her own parent shows that she has less humanity than either of them. This would also make her more evil than Roman, who just wanted to be accepted by his mother. I'd say Jill is worse than Mickey because the latter at least was honest enough to want to go to trial over his crimes. Jill wants to kill people, pretend she didn't do it, and be seen in the positive light for surviving a murder spree that she heavily created. Who's to say that if Jill had succeeded in killing Sydney and thereby having no witnesses who knew the truth of her plot, she wouldn't have participated in another killing spree down the line? Remember, she was open about trying to emulate Sydney, and it could be reasoned that she might want to repeat Sydney's experiences of surviving multiple ghost faces. When Jill is revealing her motive because of Roberts' excellent acting, you can hear the resentment in her voice as she says, "You had your 15 minutes of fame, now I want mine." You can tell that she deeply despises Sydney, and anytime she's been cordial with her up until now has been a hoax, that she's finally free to say all of the things she wants to express to her. It's really disturbing when you consider, as a viewer of the first three films, we know that Sydney did almost nothing to create her situation. She was targeted by these killers for years because of either her mother, or in the case of Mrs. Loomis, killing her son, who Sydney only killed in self-defense. That's one of the things that makes Jill different from Sydney. She wants the fame of being a survivor in one of these sprees, and unlike Sydney, is actually culpable for these events happening. A very under-discussed part of Jill's character is her relationship with Kirby. We are introduced to Jill as she heads to Kirby's car, and we see Jill and Kirby having fun together in their room before Olivia's murder. It's also worth noting that when Kirby is seemingly struck fatally by Charlie, Jill is nowhere to be seen, meaning that she could have had no role or desire to help in killing Kirby. I know that when you have twist villains, it renders much of their previous characterization null and void, but I think there is a case to be made that while Jill may not have cared about her mother, she could have cared about Kirby. It isn't uncommon for psychopaths to have individuals that they actually care about, oftentimes more than members of their own family. Maybe the reason she betrays Charlie isn't because she wants all the fame for herself, but because she's upset that he seemingly killed Kirby. He's taken the one person she actually felt something for. Here's something else I've noticed. Jill attacks both Sydney and Gale at various points in the movie, and does it in a way that is clearly attempting to kill them. But I think there's a case to be made that she might actually like Dewey. The reason I say this is because we know from the start of the film that Dewey is acquainted with Kirby, as he calls her name after she drives by him. So we can infer that he has probably met Jill. When Jill tries to finish Sydney off in the hospital, she only attacks Dewey when he tries to intervene. She also threatens to shoot him in the head, but this only happens because she is trying to get Deputy Hicks to surrender a weapon to her. And the way that Roberts delivers her line, in my opinion, gives off a reluctance to the whole affair, with her even asking, you think I won't do it? I believe she might actually harbor some respect for Dewey. And I have two pieces of evidence to support my claim. One, she wants to be famous, but is a perpetrator of the crime she seeks to gain fame from. As the town sheriff, Dewey is going to be investigating the crime, and she could possibly want him to live because she is curious as to whether or not he will uncover the truth. Also, and I'll admit that this one is more far-fetched, but we spoke earlier about how Jill has an absent father. Maybe Jill sees Dewey as something of a father figure and doesn't want to target one of the few people that she actually has some respect for. Again, how many older men do we see actually talking to her and her seemingly enjoying their presence? One of the problems I have with almost every horror franchise, with the possible exception of Nightmare on Elm Street, another Wes Craven creation, is the lack of supplementary material like comics. I know for a lot of people, Jill might seem like any ordinary evil character, but I think there's much in her past that could have been explored in some other medium besides the film. When she recounts killing her mother, she says no great loss there. You have to wonder, did she have a strained relationship with her mother? Does she blame her for driving away her father? Has she ever met her father? How many times has she met Sidney before the film? Was Sidney someone she ever actually admired, or was her resentment always there? How long has she known Charlie? When did they start planning the murders? These are the kind of things that I believe would only enhance Jill's character. And I'm very serious when I say that there are so many layers to her that she probably could have her own prequel movie just to answer all of this. It's only fitting that we talk about the original intentions for the character. Jill was supposed to survive and carry on into Scream 5 as a college student, while Sidney, a professor at the same school, had amnesia of Jill's attempted killing of her. Jill would be stalked by a new Ghostface who was aware of what she did, and she would have to kill them to keep her murders a secret. I would have loved to have seen this movie, and the reason for that is because I've always wished they didn't kill off all the Ghostfaces, as I think allowing some to survive could lead for interesting story developments. In the case of Jill, having a whole movie where she has become a celebrity, achieved what she wanted, and now has to return to what she actually is, a murderous thug, to take out the only other person who knows the truth sounds interesting. Would she have been revealed as the previous film's killer by the end of the movie? Would she have tried to kill Sidney again? Those ideas that Williamson had sounded very original. Emma Roberts spoke about the possibility of returning as Jill earlier this year during an interview. In my Jamie Lloyd videos, I spoke about my desire to see Danielle Harris come back and play an older version of the character. In the case of Jill, the main obstacle to me wanting her to come back is that I have no confidence in radio silence. This is a group of people who have no reverence for the characters created by Wes Craven, and they're a group of people who are not original. It sucks because even if you disregard the original plans for 5, you can still do interesting things with Jill. Maybe have her in jail and remorseful for what she did, or she could figure into the plot by speaking to investigators to help them catch the new Ghostface as part of some exchange to get a lighter sentence. But whenever I get on one of my sprees of ideas, I always have to remind myself that there are many horror fans who couldn't care less about character development and doing something different. As long as they get to see Ghostface kill someone, they're happy. And this is often to the detriment of characters in their own series, but, they don't care, so this is allowed to go on. Scream 4 was the last installment in the Scream film series directed by its creator. And in my opinion, he went out on a high note by creating one of the best characters and most certainly the best villain that this series has ever known. Jill may start off as an ordinary teenage girl, but she's really a combination of the product of a broken family, jealousy, and betrayal, in addition to being a literal embodiment of doing anything for fame. She joins a long list of horror characters that I wish we got to spend more time with. A list that includes Pamela Voorhees, Trish Jarvis, Roland Kincaid, Jamie Lloyd, and Rachel Carruthers. But the one thing all of these characters have is that in spite of their limited appearances, they managed to make an impression. I'd go as far as to say that besides Freddy Krueger, Jill is the best villain that Wes Craven ever created, and most certainly one of his top 10 characters.